You know what bothers me most about this Emperor-forsaken universe? The silence before the storm. That retching, unnerving stillness that takes your guts, grips them, and ties them in knots. This is a galaxy gone to the warp. Silence isn't peaceful. There's no such thing. It's the breath you take before the plunge. That awful long moment before the shit is about to hit the fan. My name? Don't matter. I'm just another number. Just another guardsman in a sea of countless billions. All that matters to us is duty and how we die. We're spread thin across the stars, and we're the only thing that stands between you and the shit you don't even want to know about. That duty has cost me friends. It has cost me my sanity. It has dragged my flesh to the edge and back. Now I'm standing here on the edge of another God Emperor forsaken sector on the eastern fringe, sweating in my boots to find out what fresh hell waits for us down on the surface. They haven't told us who or what we're about to face, and that's never a good sign. In the Guard, no news is bad news. It means we're about to walk into something we most likely won't walk away from. Something that will most likely tear us apart before we even have time to draw our last guns. Command doesn't give a damn about our fears. We're not supposed to have them. But when the brass keeps secrets, it's usually because the truth is something they themselves are too afraid to tell us. The commander, wrapped in the drab uniform of the Munitorum's finest, paces back and forth across the metal decking, her boots echoing off the metal. She looks confident, sure, but even a grunt like me can see the cracks she's trying to hide from the rest of us. She's anxious. Hell, we all are. And that anxiety seeps into this gathering of human flesh, like the burnt ozone of a last gunshot. She halts in front of us and starts to give us a speech. I don't hear most of it. I've heard it 1,000 times before. Everyone in the Guard has. The Emperor will protect us this. Heretics are the enemy that. Duty before dishonor and all that crap. She doesn't hide how she really feels. The speech feels routine, like she said it 1,000 times before. She has, but that's not the point. The only thing that changes is the name of the system or the dreary rock we're supposed to liberate in the name of him on terror. This speech, the hollow camaraderie that she tries to instill, falls flat against hollow ears. It does nothing. We know it, and I think she knows it too. Several of the men cough, shifting in place. They cast distracted glances around the interior of the troop ship, and then their attention is brought back by a stare from the Commissar. He stands there, always at the commander's left. He's like a spectre of death, only a constant reminder of the price we pay for failure or cowardice. He's the Emperor's hand, always on our heels, ever sniffing for the slightest hesitation or signs of heretic fall. Every so often I feel his cold gaze alight upon me, like a sniper staring me down from the scope of his weapon. The Commissar, Vaughn, I think his name is, has eyes like a hawk. His features are sharp, lean and predatory. I don't know what world breeds people like him, but whatever it is, I want nothing to do with it. I try to look for the smallest of impressions in that flinty stare of his, but all I get is the grim, thin-lipped, no-nonsense attitude that the Schola Presenium seems to produce. The only time I've ever seen him slow the slightest bit of emotion is when he has a bolt pistol to the head of one of the boys about to deliver the Emperor's peace. Joy isn't the right word for it. When I look into his eyes during those moments, all I see is pride. Thing is, you don't notice the expression until it's far too late. By the time you do, some unfortunate sap is going to die. The Guard don't suffer the weak. They grind us down into paste and then rebuild us into proper soldiers. 3 of us have already learned the hard way what that means. Whether for treachery, cowardice or heresy, I haven't bothered asking. It feels like his justice, the Emperor's justice, is carried out on a whim. Vaughn doesn't seem to need rhyme or reason to execute. He just does. Right now, his attention is on me, or at least it feels that way. The servo skull that hovers beside him, with his glowing red optics and eerie green augmetic eye, bores down on me. It feels as if it's boring into my soul, judging me and finding me wanting. The green eye matches the mechanical one replacing Vaughn's left eye. They're connected. Vaughn sees what it sees, and I try my best to look like a model soldier. If I'm gonna die, it'll be on the battlefield, not with a commissar's pistol pointed at my skull. The commander walks past Vaughn, momentarily blocking my view. Despite his presence, I can feel that the commander at least believes in what she's doing. The fire is gone in her, sure. Hasn't been there since that massacre way back on Crass. I don't believe her any more than I believe the commissar is happy in his solitary moments. But belief is powerful. And sometimes that's all we've got. And that's the cruelest joke of them all. Belief won't stop a bolt around from blowing you to pieces, or a tyrannid claw disemboweling you. That's the only thing holding this Imperium together. The only thing preventing us from going to pieces. There's a noise that goes through the ship. A noise that only people who've served as long as I have recognise. It's not the creak of metal or the whine of machinery. This noise settles deep in your bones and scrapes along your soul. It's a disquieting sensation, felt rather than heard. It's a telltale sign that the ship has made the transition from real space into the immaterium. That hellish place that no mortal soul can fully comprehend. Anyone that says they can is either bluffing or a heretic. It's hard to describe the sensation, really. It's like a clawing deep in your gut, almost as if your insides are being twisted and rearranged by invisible hands. You feel your arms, flex your fingers. Everything is where it should be, but something in your mind whispers otherwise. It's as if the ship is there, but not there. A ghost in a void, a flickering image caught between worlds. You can hear them, you know, the demons, the neverborn. Those things we're not supposed to talk about, but are all too real. They're out there scratching against the hull, beating against the Geller fields, trying to find a way in. They can't, but their whispers do. You hear them in your quiet moments when you think you're safe. They take your thoughts and fears, manifest them in strange ways. You see things when you're travelling through the warp. People who aren't there, dead risen from the grave, that sort of thing. But you don't speak of them. No one does. Talking about them gives them a voice, acknowledges them, makes them real. The ship shudders as it makes its transition, causing the metal bones within to tremble. It's a sickening, disorienting feeling, as if your soul is being stretched thin, left behind while your body is being hurled through the warp along with the ship. It gets a little easier when you've been through it enough times. Eventually you barely notice it. The hell we are travelling through, where no mortal soul was ever meant to tread. They try to keep us distracted, to fill our days with endless drills and exercises. They know what happens when idle minds are left to wander in the warp. I suppose it works in a way. I've lost track of how many push-ups I've done, how many walls I've climbed, how many times I've gone through the motions of battle in a simulated environment. The repetition, the routine, it numbs the mind, dulls the edge of fear. I've blessed and cleaned my lasgun so many times it's become a ritual, a sacred act to keep the madness at bay, to keep the darkness from seeping in. The Emperor protects, they say. But it's hard to feel that protection out here, so far from terror, so far from anything that makes sense. And then there are the kit inspections. Emperor only knows how many times I've been jolted awake in the dead of shipboard night by my sergeant's bellowing voice, barking orders, demanding perfection. There's no room for error in the guard, no room for weakness. It's exhausting, but it keeps us focused, keeps our minds from dwelling on what's waiting out there in the void, on what might happen if the Gila field fails. In those quiet moments, when the drills are done and the sergeant's gone, that's when it creeps in. The fear, the doubt. You start to wonder if the Emperor's really watching, if he can see you out here in the darkness, or if you've been abandoned, left to the mercy of the warp. But you don't dwell on it, because to dwell is to lose hope, and hope is the only thing keeping you from falling into the abyss. After the briefing, we're herded like cattle to the Valkyrie dropships. We draw lots to see who gets what ship, and I draw number 8. Yet another unlucky sign. 8 is a bad number. Everyone knows it. Doesn't sit well with me or any guardsman worth his salt. The bird that belongs to that number is a battered old gunship the troops have taken to naming Black Bessie. She's notorious. A rough, unforgiving ride down to the surface. The kind that leaves your guts twisted and your faith in the Emperor hanging by a thread. I get a good look at her once we reach the hangar. The graceful forward sweep of the dorsal fin, cutting a graceful line through the air like the edge of a power sword. The weapons mounted under them, barrels of Hellstrike missiles, primed and ready to deliver the Emperor's judgment in force to any heretic that dares stand in the way. The thought of the righteous wrath they'll rain down almost brings a tear to me eye. But Bessie, she looks different. You can tell just by looking at her that she's no fresh recruit delivered off the factory floor straight from Mars. She's an old girl, a scarred and damaged veteran from dozens of different campaigns. Her hull is crisscrossed with dozens of dents, scratches, patches, and a kaleidoscopic collection of other battle damage. She has no honor markings, no polish to her gun grey metal, nothing to denote any reason to believe she'll bring me down to the surface with all my extremities intact. There's a rumour that goes around about number 8. They say her machine spirit is as ornery as an unbroken grox. Trying to control her is like trying to get a Lord General to fight on the front lines. Can't do it. Or rather, Bessie won't do it. Her spirit, or so I've been told, is stubborn and refuses to cooperate no matter how much the cogboys try to placate her. Add a reputation to her, and it slowly becomes understandable as to why I hesitate to even step onto the craft. If people think Bessie is bad, there are worse things to drive a soldier mad. As I mentioned earlier, it's the dreaded silence before the coming storm that grates at me most. I despise ship travel. It's not right being cooped up in these giant metal coffins waiting to die. The voidheads who run the ships are competent enough, but there's nothing a warrior hates more than being useless. If the shit hits the fan, then there's nothing I can do but sit on my hands while I wait for an errant las cannon to blast a gaping hole in the ship, and for me to be sucked out into the airless expanse of space surrounding this metal tube. You feel like you're nothing but a civvy, unable to do anything but wait and die. I'll be honest, I'd rather kiss a demon than sit one more day inside this metal hell. Don't tell the commissar I said that, obviously. I don't need a bullet introduced to my skull anytime soon. I feel it rather suddenly. The sensation of my body finally catching up to my soul. The quiet whispers are finally gone, and I once again feel at home in my own skin. We've entered real space again, and that means it's time. I grab my kit and head towards the gunship. Fear weighs down every single step, but I trudge on. It's always like this, the moments before the drop. Once you get down there, it's all blood, guts, yelling and blasting. You still feel fear. That never goes away. But you forget fear as adrenaline floods your veins and the life or death battle takes over. The air around me is thick with a smell of ungulates and incense. Red-robed cogboys move with mechanical precision. They wave their burners and kneel before the Valkyries, screeching in that binaric language of theirs. The sound grates on every nerve. I'm sure it's beautiful if you understand it, but to me it just sounds like claws scraping against steel. As I approach the hangar, Bessie's hull looms before me. I grab the handhold, and another guard grasps me forearm, pulling me into the fuselage. I grab a seat and buckle in. While secured, I grab my last gun a little tighter to my chest. I close my eyes, willing my heart down from my throat. It's a losing battle, and I offer a prayer to the Golden Throne. I may be cynical, but I'm not stupid. The hatch of the Valkyrie slams shut, and the green lumen above changes to red, bathing the interior in a shade of blood. Rising from the hangar to join the others. The servos whine and the engine noise roars in my ears. I can see the outside through the small plascrete slits in the hatch. The hangar looms by, and for a few moments we're lost to the void of space. I feel the hum of the engine through my boots. The gunship starts to buck and shake. From this sensation alone, I know we've hit atmosphere. Moments later, the ship is enveloped in a nimbus of orange fire as we break through the outer shell of the planet and into its skies. We burst through, and the air is filled with chaos. Blossoms of smoke and fire bloom all around us, each small burst filled with deadly shrapnel. They never mention this part when they train you. The shaking, the rending, the sensation that you could drop out of the sky at any moment. The reality comes true as I stare through the plascrete. The Valkyrie next to us takes a direct hit, a lucky shot amongst thousands hurled from the ground with visceral hate. The explosion rips her apart, rending metal. Her ammunition detonates, creating a crawling fireball that consumes steel and flesh alike. Bessie too is buffeted heavily by enemy fire. She rocks left and right as her pilot tries desperately to avoid the incoming death. Out there I can almost feel it, the shell fire that has my name on it. I can only pray that it's not this planet. We all have to buy the farm someday. Some of us only buy a part of it. We lose a limb, a finger, an eye. But eventually, our debts come to collect for all the luck we've used. And eventually we have to buy the whole damn thing. The entire gunship suddenly lurches heavily to the left. I feel my stomach rise to my chest as we begin to drop. This isn't the steady downward climb of a hot entry. No. This is the nosedive of a direct impact. The only reason we haven't gone into a tailspin is due to the luck and training of the pilot. For several heart-wrenching moments, I utter a prayer to him on terror. I promise him everything. My immortal soul, my dedication, my home planet, my precious bunk back on the troop ship. Anything to get me out of this alive. Just when I think I'm going to die, the world changes its mind, and Bessie suddenly rights herself. Thank the Emperor for yet another lucky save. I feel my stomach flip inside my gut as the dropship levels out and comes to a steel-rending halt. The lumen shifts from red to yellow. This is it. The moment every single one of us has been trained for. There's no room for fear, no room for doubt. I push it all to the back of my mind. Now there is only room for two things: death and duty. Not necessarily in that particular order. The lumen flashes green and the hatch opens. For the first time, I glimpse the hellscape I'm expected to save. Gas bolts fill the interior, heating the metal where they impact. The sergeant shouts for us to get our lazy asses on the move. We unbuckle and the training kicks in. For some, it isn't enough. One of my squad mates goes down, a last bolt searing a hole in his throat. Another takes a hit to his face, the bolt entering his eye and bursting out the back of his helmet. I lower my head and rush into madness, my eyes scanning for cover. I know our mission. We're the tip of the spear. The enemy has dug deep into the soil of this planet and built a defensive line. We're the push. The attack meant to break that line and open the way for the other troops and war machines to push through. With a final prayer to the Emperor, I charge into battle. All around me, the visceral sounds of war fill my ears. Men and women scream. Shells explode. Shots burst past my helmet so close I can feel the heat searing my skin. I raise my weapon and aim down sights, pulling the trigger. Every shot is careful and calculated. Each bolt is the death of a heretic. I am engulfed in the chaos of war. It surrounds and envelops me. Soon there is nothing in my mind other than training and my duty to the God Emperor. This is what it means to serve the Imperium. This is the life of a guardsman. One battle at a time, one breath at a time, until there's nothing left to give but the ashes of war. The scene before me is nothing short of bloody carnage. This planet is full of revolt. The air is filled with a thick stench of burnt flesh, smoking promethium, and the crisp smell of expended ammo. We've touched down outside the walls of the capital. I can see the trenches stretched out like a maze of death. We're in no man's land. Out in the open, we need to move, and I'll wheel my legs forward. The Valkyrie is a sitting duck, a target that if it doesn't move, will be destroyed in a matter of moments. I suck in a deep breath and keep firing. Move, shoot, move, shoot again. I never stay in one place for too long. I keep moving, ignoring the fallen and the pleading screams of help from the injured and dying. I don't have time to save them. To stop is to die, and I don't intend on dying today. I hate that smell, the sickening tang of burning flesh, as death is delivered via a brief flash of bright red light you never see coming. I hate the coppery tang of blood on my tongue. These are sensations that cut through everything else. It's a thing you always remember, no matter how much you try to forget. These feelings are what haunt your nightmares, steal your sleep. You think you'll get used to it, that the impact will go away with time. You think it'll just be a part of battle, that you'll overcome it, but you never will. The memory of it sticks with you, buries itself deep in your mind. You'll forget it, but it always surfaces when you least expect it. The battle is a mess. We're supposed to be moving as one cohesive unit, but when I look around, all I see is a ragged mess of individuals and small groups. To my dawning horror, I remember the Valkyrie that went down. Number 1, the command dropship. The truth of it hits me. The commander has bought the farm and we have no leadership. The enemy must have realised this and is exploiting it to all of their ability. On the bright side though, that bastard of a commissar had been with her too. At least I no longer have to worry about a bullet in me back. Ahead of me, a guardsman with the stripes of a veteran sergeant is rallying people to him. He's shouting orders, his voice cutting through the din of battle. I can't make out his words, but his body language, his confidence draws me in. His presence is a stark contrast to the battle unfolding around us. A figure of authority amidst a sea of madness. I find myself moving towards him without thinking. The sergeant's confidence is like a beacon in the storm. He gathers us around him, rallying us and pushing us forwards. Slowly, the individuals become a group. A group forms a squad. Finally, We drive against the enemy as the spearhead we were trained to be. I seize upon this sense of camaraderie, this organisation. I seize it, clutching it with everything I have left, because it's all that stands between me and the abyss. In this hellscape, that glimmer of hope is the only thing keeping me from falling apart. And I cling to it like my life depends on it, because in truth, it does. As an ad hoc unit, we start to make our escarpment. More of an exposed section of rock, really, but it's the only cover for 100 clicks in any direction. The ground beneath our boots is a treacherous mix of blood, bodies and mud. Several slip and fall, never to get up again. Bodies lie everywhere, twisted and broken, their faces frozen in the final painful moments of their death. My boots slip, but by grit alone I remain standing. We're so close now. The escarpment is just ahead. It's a solid foundation in a hell where everything else is slipping from our grasp. The sergeant reaches it first, turning to cover us as we scramble up the slope, his last gun barking defiance at the enemy. I throw myself against the rocky outcrop, feeling the cool stone beneath my hands, this sense of safety it provides. We've made it, but the fight isn't over. It never is. The enemy is still out there, still coming, and we're still here, still breathing, still fighting. The sergeant barks more orders, rallying us, keeping us focused. There's no time to mourn the dead, no time to dwell on the horrors we've seen. There's only the fight, only the mission, only the next moment. And so we fight, together, as a unit, as soldiers of the Imperium, driven by duty, by fear, by the will to live. The smell of death is all around us, but we push it aside, push it down, because there's no room for anything but the fight. The Emperor protects, they say, and maybe he does, but out here in the mud and the blood, it's up to us to protect each other. And we will, or we'll die trying. Finally, after what feels like an eternity, we reach the outcrop of rock, our makeshift sanctuary in this hellish landscape. The ground around us is peppered with last fire, the dirt kicked up in little plumes by stubber rounds, each one a near miss, a reminder of how close we are to oblivion. We huddle together, our breaths ragged, the air thick with a stench of ozone, burnt flesh and fear. But there's no time to rest. The push isn't over, not by a long shot. The target is agonizingly close, less than 200 meters ahead. It's not some grand castle or a towering fortress, but a series of bunkers, squat and ugly, their walls pitted and scarred by years of conflict. They're built to withstand anything, and right now, they're doing their job well. The enemy last fire is relentless, coming from a series of heavy last cannons, mounted on pintles barely visible in the fortification's windows. They spit red hell in our direction, the beams cutting through the air with lethal precision, each one a death sentence waiting to be delivered. We're pinned down, and every second we stay here, the odds of survival drop. The sergeant knows it, and so do we. Those last cannons are shredding us, reducing men to nothing but ash and bone. The sound of their discharge is a constant, gut-wrenching whine, punctuated by the screams of the dying and the explosive bursts of fire and debris. But the fort is tantalizingly close. Just 200 meters of no man's land separates us from our objective. 200 meters of open ground, less fire, and death. The sergeant takes a deep breath, his eyes narrowing as he calculates the distance, the odds, the likelihood that any of us will make it to the other side. His jaw tightens, and for a moment I can see the weight of command bearing down on him. The knowledge that he's about to lead us into the jaws of the beast. But he doesn't flinch. He knows what needs to be done. And so, we do it. He gathers us up with a few sharp gestures, pulling us into a huddle. Our heads close as he speaks. His voice is low, firm, carrying a grim determination that cuts through the air and the noise. "This is it, lads," he says, his words clipped and precise. "We push now, or we die here. There's no other way. We need to take that fort, and we need to do it now. On my mark, we charge. We stay low, we move fast, and we hit them hard. The Emperor's with us, so let's show these bastards what that means." The sergeant orders us to affix bayonets. It's an order I expected, but one I always dread hearing. There's something about the finality of it, the cold, hard reality that this is about to get up close and personal. If I'm honest, I've always preferred the detached efficiency of shooting an enemy from a distance. Firing a las gun becomes a mechanical act. Point, squeeze the trigger, repeat. It's a process that you don't have to think about. It doesn't demand feeling. You don't see the results of your work up close. You don't have to smell the death, the stench of voided bowels, or the sight of entrails spilling onto the blood-soaked earth. Close combat is different. It's intimate in a way that terrifies me. And in those moments, time seems to stretch and warp. Your perception narrows. Everything else fades away. And all that remains are flashes, grainy, fragmented memories that will haunt you later. You'll remember bits and pieces, fragments of horror and sensation, the sharp tang of blood in the air, the weight of your weapon in your hands, the sound of steel on flesh. It's a primal experience, one that strips away the thin veneer of chivalry and honor, that reveals the brutal reality of what it means to be a human. But most of all, you remember the faces of those you kill in the Emperor's name. Every one of them sears itself into your memory, a gallery of agony and death that you can never unsee. Some faces are twisted with fear, their eyes wide and desperate as they realize their end is near. Others are resigned, already dead inside before you strike the final blow. But the ones that haunt you most are those filled with pain, the shock and disbelief, the light fading from their eyes as death takes hold. It's those faces that linger, that come back to you in the dark hours of the night. Now! The sergeant's order finally comes, his voice cutting through the chaos like a knife, loud and hoarse as he bellows above the din. There's a grim finality to it, a sound that tells you there's no turning back. I want to know if he realizes he's sending us to die. And if he does, he doesn't let it show. There's no time to think, no time to process what's about to happen. Before I know it, my legs are pumping, driving me forward, my feet pounding across the dirt as if they have a will of their own. Charge! For the Emperor! We scream as we charge, our voices raw and desperate. The words tear from my throat, a primal roar that feels like it's coming from somewhere deep inside. A dark place filled with rage and fear. It's a battle cry, a declaration of defiance against my death, against the enemy, against the very universe itself. Around me, men are falling, cut down by last fire, ripped apart by stubborn rounds. In those first few seconds, our company is reduced to a third of its former strength, bodies dropping like flies. My breath comes in ragged gasps, the air burning my lungs. Each step a struggle against the pain and exhaustion that threatens to drag me down. I see it all in a blur of motion. The soldier beside me is bisected by a burst from the enemy emplacement, torso separating from her legs in a spray of blood and viscera. The sight is horrifying, but there's no time to process it, no time to mourn. Another scream pierces the air, a raw, agonized scream as a trooper clutches the ragged stump where his arm used to be, his life leaking out in crimson streams. I reach the trenches and vault over, my heart racing in my throat as I duck down to avoid the withering fire from the pillbox. My boots hit the mud with a sickening squelch, the muck rising up to my heels, threatening to pull me under. Every step is an effort, as if the planet itself doesn't want me here. The pull of my boots and the contending weight of the mud clinging to them is a moment, a split second where everything slows down, and then I see it. The heretic charges at me, a figure clad in the tattered remnants of a guard uniform, now muddy and defiled beyond recognition. The once proud aquila on the thing's chest has been defaced or torn away, replaced by the blasphemous marks of heresy that sear my eyes just to look at it. His face is a nightmare, warped and twisted, covered in oozing pustules and sores, teeth sharpened into vicious daggers that gleam as the foul thing screams an incoherent war cry. This thing is no longer a soldier. This is a monster, a creature consumed by the corruption of chaos. Its very existence is an affront to the Emperor, a walking abomination that must be purged. A surge of revulsion and hatred rises within me, banishing any lingering hesitation or fear. There's no time to think, no time for doubt. I feel within me only the cold mechanical precision of my training. I raise my last gun, the bayonet glinting in the dim, hellish light of the battlefield. The heretic lunges with its own weapon, and I move aside. My life is only spared on the narrow edge of a blade, as I feel its weapon cut into my uniform and graze my skin. Pain wells up along with the spreading heat, but I force myself to ignore it. I thrust my blade at him with all the force I can muster. I feel the sickening crunch of bone as it slides home between the heretic's ribs. Its war cry turns into a gurgle, brackish blood congealing at the corner of its lips. In one defiant moment, it spits at me, and I feel the burn of acid on my exposed flesh. The wound should have been fatal, but its corruption gives the creature strength. It thrashes on the end of my blade, trying to drag me down into the mud where it can leverage its greater bulk against my own. With a surge of strength, I wrench my bayonet free and lunge again, forcing the monstrosity up against the wall. I draw my combat knife and in one swift, brutal motion, I slash at the thing's throat. The edge of my blade cuts through muscle and sinew, as its foul life's blood showers me in a dark baptism. It collapses into the mud, its blood pooling around it, mixing with the filth and grime of the battlefield. I stand over it, panting, bloodied, but alive. The battle rages on around me, a cacophony of violence and death, but in that moment all I can hear is my own ragged breathing. All I can see is the fallen heretic at my feet. I glance around and realise with a sinking heart that our numbers have dwindled even further. The battlefield is a slaughterhouse. The air is thick with a stench of blood and death. A miasma that clings to everything. My comrades, the men and women who stood beside me just moments ago, are now little more than lifeless husks, scattered across the blood-soaked earth. The screams of the dying and the clash of steel echo in my ears. It's the silence, the absence of voices I knew, that strikes the deepest fear into my heart. My eyes catch on a young corporal, barely more than a girl, her face a mask of frozen agony and terror, as a mob of heretics descend upon her like ravenous wolves. They tear at her with wickedly edged daggers, ripping her apart in a flurry of blood and screams. The sight sends a jolt of horror through me, and desperation drives me to raise my last gun, firing off a few frantic shots. I drop one of the heretics, its body crumpling into the mud, but the others continue their grisly work, undeterred by their fallen comrade, their eyes wild with the madness of chaos. A shout snaps my attention to the sergeant, just in time to witness a horrific sight. A sickly glow cuts through his body, a power sword cleaving the sergeant from head to groin. The weapon's power field sears his flesh and carapace armor like they were nothing but parchment, splitting him in two with a sickening hiss and crackle. His body falls apart in two grotesque halves, blood and entrails spilling into the mud. And just like that, last thread of hope dies. The sergeant, our rock, our anchor in this hell, is gone. The power sword swings again, wielded by a maddened enemy commissar, his eyes wide and wild with insanity, his mouth frothing as he spits blasphemies that sear my mind just to hear. For a moment, just a single instant, I don't see the heretic there. For just a fleeting second of time I see Vaughn, not as he is, but as I've always seen him. This only heightens my fear, and I feel the grip of my weapon faltering. The monstrosity before me is a towering figure of madness and hatred, the once pristine uniform now a tattered mockery, covered in the blood of the fallen. The red sash that I've come to both fear and respect is gone, replaced by a grotesque chain of skulls and human bones. I know I'm outmatched. The heretic's strength, his speed, all fueled by the dark powers that have claimed the soul of this once hand of the Emperor. Thoughts race through my mind, doubts rising to the fore. Where is the Emperor now? The questions echo in my mind, unbidden, as true fear grips me. Icy and suffocating. The Commissar's power sword arcs toward me, a blur of lethal energy. I barely manage to throw myself to the side, narrowly avoiding the blow. The power field sizzles past, close enough to singe the hairs on the back of my neck, and slams me into the trench wall with a thunderous crack, blowing a chunk of it apart and showering me in foul-smelling mud and debris. The force of the impact throws me to the ground, my ears ringing, my vision blurred. But I don't stop. I can't. I have to move. Have to push past it. If I can destroy the bunker, maybe, just maybe the next wave of guardsmen might stand a chance. My breath is ragged, my heart pounding as I close the distance. Every step of battle against the weight of despair, the crushing knowledge that we're losing. I will not die in vain. I will not be a waste. I will not dishonor my regiment. The world will judge Cadia by the next actions I perform. The bunker is just ahead, mere scant meters away. It looms over me, an ugly squat structure of concrete and steel, its walls pocketed with scars of countless battles. I reach into my kit and pull out a crack grenade, my hands trembling as I fumble for the pin. The weight of it is reassuring, a promise of destruction, of something I can still do in the Emperor's name. The Commissar is right behind me, his footsteps heavy, his breath a harsh rasp that chills my blood. I can feel his presence like a physical weight, a shadow that looms over me, threatening to crush me at any moment. I focus on my grenade, on the objective, on the one thing I can still accomplish. This is what will define me. I've lived for so long, and if I have to buy the farm this day, at least I can take him with me. I feel the courage rising in my chest, and for the briefest of moments I can sense the presence of him on terror. His will is guiding my hand. I know it to be true. I can still do this, I think, as I grasp the pin and begin to pull. The thought of fulfilling my duty, of striking a blow for the Emperor, fills me with a fierce resolve, a desperate hope that maybe, just maybe, this sacrifice will mean something. But then, pain. Sharp, searing, and all-consuming explodes in my back. It's like nothing I've ever felt before. A white-hot lance of agony that carves through my flesh, driving deep into my ribs, grazing my heart, and then bursting out through my chest. My breath catches, blood flooding my lungs, and the cracked grenade slips from my fingers, clattering uselessly to the ground. It rolls to the side and I stumble to my knees, losing all sensation from the waist down. I roll onto my back and stare at the sky. pain is overwhelming, drowning out everything else. But somehow, through the haze, I managed to turn my head, catching sight of the commissar who struck me down. His eyes are wide with madness, his power sword dripping with my blood. I don't see his face. I see the image of Vaughn staring me down. Is he holding a power sword? I can't tell. All I see is the bolt pistol in his other hand. Is that my vision fading, or is there smoke from the barrel? I'm not a heretic, am I? I didn't run. I am no coward. Why did Vaughn kill me? The vision of my commissar fades and all I see is the twisted grin on his face as darkness closes in. The sounds of the battle fading into a distant roar. I lie there in the mud, my blood pooling around me, mixing with the filth of the battlefield. I can't feel my limbs anymore, just the cold creeping in, numbing everything except the burning in my chest. A racking cough tears from my lips, and I taste the metallic tang of blood. I'm dying, and I know it. There's no escaping this. I look up at the sky, my vision blurring, and I see the troop ships descending, reinforcements landing in waves. For a moment hope flares, but it's quickly extinguished. Something's wrong. They're touching down far from where we've been fighting, out of reach of the chaos we've been thrown into. The realization dawns slowly, a sickening weight settling in me gut. We were a distraction. That's all we ever were. The uncaring leaders, the high command, they threw us at the enemy's defences, knowing full well we'd be slaughtered, drawing the heretics' attention so the real assault could land unopposed. We were nothing but bait, sacrificial lambs sent to the slaughter for a greater cause that we'll never see. What was the point? I've given years of service to him on Terra. I have slain countless enemies in his name. Don't I deserve some kind of reward? What the hell did I do to be thrown to the wolves like this? I've always known I'm just a cog in the Emperor's war machine, a single guardsman among countless billions. But to have my life tossed away like this, wasted on a feint, it's more than I can bear. A hot tear streaks down my face, mixing with the mud and blood. In these final moments, the certainty that I've clung to all my life begins to slip away. The Emperor, the beacon of all I fought for, feels distant, uncaring. The doubt creeps in, insidious and cold, gnawing at the edges of my mind. Had I been wrong? Had I served a cause that saw me as nothing more than an expendable asset? The 4 pieces deeper than any blade. My heart slows, my breaths falter. I can feel the life draining from me, the darkness closing in. With the last of my strength, I whisper a final, broken plea. Emperor, why have you forsaken me? A broken, pathetic sob escapes my shattered lungs. Say something. Talk to me, please. I look around at the battle one last time and see only death and futility. What did I do? What did I do to deserve this? The sky above remains silent. The vast, uncaring void stretches out before me, the sounds of battle fading into nothingness as the cold takes hold. The warmth of life ebbs away, leaving only the emptiness, the lingering doubt, The unanswered questions that will never find resolution. As the darkness claims me, I realise that the Emperor's light, once so bright and clear in my mind, has dimmed, flickering like a dying ember in the vast cold of the galaxy. The certainty, the faith, the belief that carried me through so many battles, gone. Replaced by the bitter truth that we are all just pieces on a board, moved and discarded without thought or care. And in that final moment, as the void takes me, I am left with nothing but the cold, the doubt, the quiet, suffocating silence of the grave.